Ayati, chants loudly. Urugaya, worth singing. Gataha, songs. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead, and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord, is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. Om Ajnana Timrandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakso Lamitam Yena Tasmei Shri Gurube Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, purport. Devotional service to the Lord is rendered by all limbs or parts of the body. It is the transcendental, dynamic force of the spirit soul. Therefore, a devotee is engaged 100% in the service of the Lord. One can engage in devotional service when the senses of the body are purified in relation with the Lord. And one can render service to the Lord with the help of all the senses. As such, the senses and the action of the senses are to be considered impure or materialistic as long as they are employed only in sense gratification. The purified senses are engaged not in sense gratification but in the service of the Lord in toto. So far in this chapter, especially the last few texts, we've been hearing about, like in yesterday's verse, we're hearing this verse, men who are like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses. Praise those men who never listen to the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna, the deliverer from evils. And in this verse, it's kind of continuing on from the previous verse. It talks about the importance of hearing about Krishna. So in the previous verse, he was saying those persons who are not hearing about Krishna, they're compared to dogs, hogs, camels, and asses. And small animals, they praise these bigger or more stronger animals. And this was very nicely explained by Prabhupada in yesterday's purport. And today, again, the importance of hearing is being highlighted. It's saying that those human beings or those personalities who aren't utilizing their ears to hear about Krishna, their ears are no better than the ear holes of snakes. And that tongue which doesn't chant the glories of the Lord is no better than the tongue of a frog. So two things is being emphasized here. One is hearing about Krishna and the second is chanting about Krishna. And Prabhupada starts off the purport by explaining about the importance of engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. So that's one of the definitions of bhakti or devotional service that Srila Rupa Goswami gives. That Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. That devotional service is when one engages his senses in serving the master of the senses, Rishikesha. And that's what Prabhupada is explaining at the start of the purport. But in today's verse, the two senses being highlighted is that of hearing and that of speaking about Krishna. So we can first talk about the importance of hearing about Krishna. So in terms of hearing, I remember one nice purport Prabhupada gives earlier on in the second canto. Prabhupada is explaining how there's 9 forms of devotional service: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, and so on. And Prabhupada says that out of all of these 9 types of devotional service, the first one, which is Shravanam or hearing, is considered to be the most important. And Prabhupada explains why Shravanam is most important. Prabhupada says that hearing about Krishna or Shravanam is so important that unless one is doing proper Shravanam, unless one is properly hearing about Krishna, then one can't attain success in any of the other forms of devotional service. Which means, Prabhupada explains, that if you want to do Kirtanam properly, if you want to properly chant about Krishna, speak from Bhagavatam or glorify the Lord, then one must hear properly. Unless one hears properly, he can't speak. And same thing with the next one. Prabhupada explains with Smaranam. Unless one has heard properly, he can't remember Krishna properly. And Prabhupada, he goes on to explain that all the other 8 types of devotional service, unless it's solidified with proper hearing about Krishna, one can't get success in the other forms of devotional service. So Prabhupada says that hearing of Krishna is the topmost, most important out of all the 9 forms of devotional service. And unless one is hearing properly, he can't do the others properly. And we can see this in the example, like in Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami. He gives different personalities who perfected a certain type of devotional service. So for hearing is given Maharaj Parikshit, how we can learn from Maharaj Parikshit how we should be so eager to hear about Krishna. And we can see this right from the first canto of Bhagavatam. When Maharaj Parikshit, he hears that he's been cursed, he immediately gives up his family, kingdom, and goes straight to the Ganges. And when he sees all the sages and great exalted rishis and great devotees from all around the universe coming, he first greets them nicely, offers his obeisances, welcomes them, and then immediately he asks them to talk about Krishna. Immediately he asks them to glorify the Lord and tell him what's his actual duty in life. And there's one nice verse that Maharaj Parikshit he recites, which is quoted again in Chaitanya Charitamrita many times to highlight the eagerness of a devotee, how a devotee should be very eager to hear about Krishna. So in one very nice verse in the first canto, Maharaj Parikshit, he tells, like, once all the great sages and rishis, they come and assemble, where Maharaj Parikshit is fasting on the bank of the Ganges. Maharaj Parikshit, he addresses the sages by saying that as far as myself is concerned, I'm not afraid about this snake bird or whatever magical thing this Brahmana boy created. I'm not afraid of death. I don't care about this, this mystical creature this Brahmana boy created that's going to take my life. All I'm concerned is simply in hearing and chanting about Krishna. You please talk to me about Krishna. Please glorify the Lord. I just want to sit here and hear about Krishna. So we can see right from the first canto of Bhagavatam how Maharaj Parikshit is exemplifying eagerness to hear about Krishna. And later on Bhagavatam, we'll see in 10th canto. 10th canto, maybe, Maharaj Parikshit was fasting for, 7 whole days. So by the time 10th canto came, maybe it was day 5 or day 4 or day 6. So Sukadeva Goswami, he was getting concerned, maybe he hasn't eaten anything or drunk anything for the past 5-6 days. Maybe he needs a break. And Maharaj Parikshit, he could understand this, and just to get the point across that actually he's not at all affected by hunger and thirst, that he just wants to hear about Krishna, Maharaj Parikshit, again, he recites a very nice, beautiful verse in the 10th canto, telling Sukadeva Goswami that because I am drinking the nectar of Krishna Katha from your lotus mouth, I am not affected at all by hunger and thirst. Please don't think that I'm getting tired of hearing about Krishna. You just please continue speaking about Krishna. Please don't stop even for a moment. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he highlights this eagerness of Maharaj Parikshit to Sanatana Goswami. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's explaining about different symptoms of the stage of someone who's on the stage of Bhava. And one of the characteristics of the stage of Bhava is avyata kalaktvam, which means that one doesn't want to waste even a moment without hearing and chanting of Krishna, without engaging his senses in Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he quotes Maharaj Parikshit as an example of this, of someone who doesn't want to waste even a moment without hearing about Krishna. And we see this throughout the Bhagavatam. Right at the start, when he's fasting, when he sees the sages, he says, just please talk to me about Krishna, please don't stop. I'm not afraid of death, I'm not afraid of whatever magical thing this Brahmana boy is going to send to me. And later on we see also in 10th canto, Maharaj Parikshit again is telling Sukadeva Goswami, please don't stop, don't worry about me, I'm not feeling hungry, I'm not feeling thirsty. You please go on pouring the nectar of Krishna's pastimes onto my ears. So that's the first example Rupa Goswami gives of someone who's perfected himself through the process of Shravanam. But if we go through all the other examples for, let's say, number 2 is Kirtanam. So for Kirtanam is Sukadeva Goswami. So Sukadeva Goswami, he was able to speak properly about Krishna because he heard properly. Unless one hears properly, then one can't speak properly. So where did Sukadeva Goswami hear from? He heard from his father, Srila Vyasadeva, who is none other than Krishna, the literal incarnation of Krishna. And then you go to the next one, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. So even to perfect Smaranam, Prabhupada says, one needs to hear properly. And the example given for Smaranam is Prahlad Maharaj. And if we look into the life of Prahlad Maharaj, he first perfected hearing. He first properly heard from Narad Muni when he was in the womb of his mother. And after hearing from Narad Muni for so long, then he was able to perfect himself, and then he was able to remember Krishna. And then through that, he was able to perfect himself. So if you take any of the forms of devotional service, Prabhupada explains, unless one has done hearing properly, he can't perfect any of the other stages of devotional service. So there's Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. So Pada Sevanam, Lakshmi Devi is given as the personality who perfected Pada Sevanam. So even Lakshmi Devi, she hears about Krishna. It's given in the Bhagavad Mahatmya that Vishnu and Mother Lakshmi, they would speak Bhagavatam to each other. Vishnu, for 1 month, he will recite the entire Bhagavatam. Mother Lakshmi will hear. And then Lakshmi Devi will recite Bhagavatam for 2 months, and Vishnu would hear. So even Lakshmi Devi herself, she's always hearing about Krishna. And because she's always hearing about Krishna, she gets inspired so much to serve the lotus feet of Krishna. And then you take Archana. Same thing with Archana. Unless we are properly hearing from the Shastras about the glories of Krishna, then how we will get the inspiration to come and worship the Lord in deity worship. So when we read Shastras, when we read Bhagavatam, when we find out about the glorious, super excellent qualities of Krishna, the beauty of Krishna, Krishna's exalted position, like we're hearing in Chaitanya Charitamrita, this one chapter, the glories of Nityananda Ram, and that we hear how Nityananda Ram, he's just the first expansion of Krishna, and from him everything comes. From him comes the first Chaturviha, then comes Narayan, then the second Chaturviha, then Mahavishnu, and then Garbhodaksha Vishnu, Shiradaksha Vishnu, and all of these, Vishnu Tattva, they're just all parts and plenary portions of Nityananda Ram, of Lord Balram. So when we hear these things, then we understand, how great is Nityananda Prabhu, how great is Balram, or how great is Srimati Radharani, how great is Radha Gopinath. Then when we come to deity worship, then we'll get more realization. Then we can do in proper consciousness that, wow, I'm worshipping the Supreme Lord, the same Supreme Lord who's maintaining the whole universe. I'm so fortunate that by Prabhupada's mercy, I get to offer lamp and incense, the same thing which the demigods, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva are hankering for. I'm getting freely by the mercy of Prabhupada. So then one can engage in the archana process, deity worship, with proper consciousness, with more inspiration and better mindset. And also in Shastras, you get examples or stories of different devotees, how they worship the Lord. And when we hear of their stories and pastimes, then we also get inspired and we also learn, what should be the proper mood in serving Krishna. Like recently, Ghanshyam Prabhu, he was giving the example of Raghava Pandit as an example of someone who was who exemplified deity worship. So Raghava Pandit, although he had a big garden, big backyard, land, where he had his own fruit trees, coconut trees, still he would go many miles away from his house. And that time there was no car, so you couldn't just drive, 10 Ks or 20 Ks to another suburb in just 20 minutes or 15 minutes and buy some fruits and come back. So 500 years ago, although he had so many different fruits growing in his own land, still he would travel many miles away to get some exotic or higher quality fruits for his deities. And not only did he travel so far away to get nice, exotic, very high quality fruits, but these fruits also cost 5 times or 10 times more than the fruits that he had near him. But still he was willing to undertake that austerity of traveling so far away and of paying even more Lakshmi. So much more Lakshmi, like 5 times, 10 times the price. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains, just to buy some nice, exotic, high-quality fruits for his deities. Then he would come, bring back, let's say, coconut, and he used to keep these coconuts in nice, cool water, so the water in the coconut will be nicely chilled. So when the deities, they take the coconut, they'll get a nice chilled coconut water. And he was so strict in his, like, as we hear Prabhupada, he says that two most important principles of deity worship is cleanliness and punctuality. So again, Raghava Pandit, he is showing by his own example about, the strict standard of cleanliness that needs to be in deity worship. One time, one of his servants was bringing some fruits to be offered to the deities, and as he was coming through the doorstep, the door frame, he just put his hand onto the ceiling of the door frame, just to support himself. And then he used that same hand again from touching the ceiling to touch the fruits. And as soon as Raghava Pandit, he saw that, he said that, okay, now these fruits, they're unfit to be offered to the deities. Why? Because Prabhupada explains in his purport, Raghava Pandit was thinking that as devotees, they walk through the door frame, then all the dust from the floor, it rises up slowly. And the dust goes up from the bottom of the floor and it comes and hits the ceiling. And that same dust my servant touched, and that same dust now he's putting on the fruits. So now these fruits, they're contaminated. How can I offer these same fruits to the deities? So this was his, high level of service to his deities. And then Ghanshyam Prabhu was explaining about how his devotion was so great that Krishna, he himself would come and finish everything, whatever Raghava Pandit gave. Whatever he served, Raghava Pandit, Krishna himself would personally come up the altar, finish everything off, finish the water in the coconut, and then Raghava Pandit will come, take out the empty coconut, then he will break open the coconut, and then take out the pulp, then again go and offer the pulp to his deities. Then again Krishna will come and finish off all the pulp. And then Krishna, he will see that actually I finished off everything, there's nothing left for him, he has no Mahaprasad. Then Krishna feeling, sorry, then Krishna will again recreate all the bhoga that Raghava Pandit offered to him. So this is one example given in Chaitanya Charitamrita of someone who exemplified deity worship. So when we read the Shastras like Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, when we do proper Shravanam and we hear about these pastimes, then naturally we also get inspired. Then next time we're in the deity kitchen cooking, we can remember the example of Raghava Pandit, how he always, was thinking about the pleasure of deities, thinking of, how can I get some nice fruits, better quality, high quality fruits, better, high quality bhoga for the Lord, how he had such great standard of cleanliness. So when we hear, then naturally when we ourselves are engaged in deity worship, we'll also be very strict, very pakka, very clean in our service, and we'll also increase our quality of deity service. So in this way, Prabhupada, he explains how any of the other 8 forms of devotional service, it needs to be accompanied by proper hearing. Unless one is hearing about Krishna properly, then one can't do deity worship properly, one can't do proper kirtanam, one can't do proper smaranam, one can't do proper padasevanam, one can't do proper dasyam, sakyam, atma nivedanam. So for sakyam is given Arjuna. So even Arjuna we see in Bhagavad Gita. It's mentioned that after Krishna, he finishes speaking the Chatusloki in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 10. It's explained that actually Bhagavad Gita technically finishes at that point. At that point, Arjuna has understood everything, and at that time, Arjuna's doubts are cleared, and he's ready to fight. After Krishna finishes the Chatusloki, and Arjuna says, Param Brahma, Param Dhamam. So in that point, Arjuna accepts Krishna as Supreme Personal Godhead, and Arjuna is ready to fight. But still, so Krishna could speak more about his glories. Arjuna then later on in chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, he quotes one nice verse in which he says that Krishna, you please go on speaking about your opulences. I want to hear more about your opulences. I want to hear more about your glories. I never tire in hearing about you. You please go on talking more about you. Then in 10th chapter, Krishna will talk about his opulences and then further on. So even we see with the case of Arjuna, who's in Sakya Ras, still, even he has that strong eagerness to hear about Krishna. And same thing with Dasyam, and same thing with Atma Nivedanam, which is complete full surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord. So unless one hears properly from the Shastras, does proper Shravanam, and hears how great Krishna is and how Krishna is so merciful, then how will one get the inspiration to surrender his whole life, mind, body, and words onto the lotus feet of the Lord? So unless one hears about the glories of Krishna, then only he'll get the inspiration to completely surrender unto the Lord. So in this way, Prabhupada explains through this particular angle of why Shravanam or hearing is so important. Unless one does proper Shravanam, he can't perfect any of the other processes. So therefore Prabhupada says, Shravanam must be accompanied for all the other forms of devotional service. And we can see this through a practical example of all other devotees who are given in the Shastras. Okay, we'll continue on with the purport. The purified senses are engaged not in sense gratification, but in the service of the Lord in toto. The Lord is the supreme with all senses, and the servitor who is part and parcel of the Lord also has the same senses. Service to the Lord is the completely purified use of the senses, as described in the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord imparted instructions with full senses, and Arjuna received them with full senses, and thus there was a perfect exchange of sensible and logical understanding between the master and the disciple. Spiritual understanding is nothing like an electrical charge from the master to the disciple, as foolishly claimed by some propaganda mongers. Everything is full of sense and logic. An exchange of views between the master and disciple is possible only when the reception is submissive and real. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that one should receive the teaching of Lord Chaitanya with intellect and full senses, so that one can logically understand the great mission. So now Prabhupada is talking about hearing properly about Krishna from a guru or from a spiritual master. And many times Prabhupada would say this point here. I'll just repeat this line. Spiritual understanding is nothing like an electrical charge from the master to the disciple, as foolishly claimed by some propaganda mongers. So many times Prabhupada will quote this, like during Prabhupada's time there was, or before that, there was one guru who, when he was very at an advanced age, it's in his biography, it's mentioned that when he was giving his blessings or giving his instructions, giving his knowledge to his disciples, at that time the guru was lamenting, "Oh no, now I've given you all my blessings, now I'm bereft of all the knowledge, I'm bereft of all my spiritual potency. Now that I've given you, I'm now, empty." And Prabhupada says this is all bogus. Actually, it's the other way around. When more Krishna you give, more Krishna you get. So Krishna consciousness is spiritual. More you give, the more further you advance, more Krishna you get actually. So it's not that, as a spiritual master, more disciple he gets and the more spiritual knowledge he imparts, the less spiritual knowledge he have himself. No, Krishna will give him more realization. He will advance even more in spiritual life. So this is actually a false conception. And Prabhupada is saying that the disciple needs to hear with proper submission and in a proper service attitude. Then only will the instruction actually sink in. So this Prabhupada, he especially emphasizes in the second chapter of first canto. Prabhupada, if you look at Prabhupada's purpose in that section, nearly every purport, every second purport, Prabhupada again and again hit at this point of one needs to hear Bhagavatam submissively and hear with the proper attitude. Then only will Bhagavatam sink into our hearts. We'll continue on. Another thing Prabhupada explains is hearing. So we heard about the importance of hearing, why hearing about Krishna is so important, as Prabhupada is explaining that unless one perfects hearing, he can't perfect the other forms of devotional service. Now Prabhupada is talking about the way in hearing must be conducted. So the way hearing about Krishna is done is that it's done in the assembly of devotees. It's done in the Sangha of devotees. Now the next question is why is it done in the Sangha of devotees? Why can't we just pick up these books and just read ourselves, just listen to lectures ourselves? Why do we need to come into the assembly of devotees and hear and chant about Krishna? One reason is, that I was thinking of that, because we can't, we're not in control of our perception. And our perception is dependent on our level of consciousness. So according to our level of consciousness, we can perceive something. And according to Shastras, like in Mahabharata, it's given that one should follow in the footsteps of the Mahajans. Why? Because the actual essence, the actual import, the actual message of the Shastras is stored in the heart of the Mahajans, is stored in the heart of the pure devotees. Because their consciousness is at a such high level, because their consciousness is pure, they can understand the essence. Krishna reveals to them the essence of all the Shastras. Therefore, we need to hear about Bhagavatam from these great purified devotees of the Lord. Just like if you take like a mundane example, just like a maths textbook, let's say year 12, HSC maths textbook. If a year 3 student comes and opens that textbook and he sees all this integration, calculation, calculus, complex numbers, and all these different things, the year 3 student, he won't understand anything. It's the same book with same math symbols and English letters, English words, but he won't understand a single word because the year 3 student, his level of consciousness is at a lower level, so he can't understand what's in that book. But if someone's consciousness is on a high level of year 12 maths, then he can easily understand. So in the same way, Prabhupada explains that according to our level of consciousness, we can only take certain amount of knowledge from the Shastras. And because pure devotees, their level of consciousness is at a much higher level, they can understand the essence of what is it that the Shastra is explaining. So if we hear from pure devotees of the Lord, as we're hearing from Prabhupada's purports now, then we can understand the actual message. If we just read the Sanskrit and the translation ourselves, then because our level of consciousness is not so high, we won't be able to perceive the actual message or the actual essence of the Shastras. And secondly, how to apply this knowledge in our life. Again, when it comes to practical application of the Shastras in our life, again, we need guidance. That's another point of why we should hear in the assembly of devotees. When we hear from senior Vaishnavas, from other devotees, we get practical examples, we get insight of how we can apply this philosophy in our own lives, in our practical lives. We will continue on in the purport. In the impure state of a living being, the various senses are fully engaged in mundane affairs. If the ear is not engaged in the service of the Lord by hearing about Him from Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, certainly the holes of the ear will be filled with some rubbish. Therefore, the messages of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam should be preached all over the world very loudly. That is the duty of a pure devotee who has actually heard about them from the perfect sources. Many want to speak something to others, but because they are not trained to speak on the subject matter of Vedic wisdom, they are all speaking nonsense, and people are receiving them with no sense. There are hundreds and thousands of sources for distributing mundane news of the world, and people of the world are also receiving it. Similarly, the people of the world should be taught to hear the transcendental topics of the Lord. Sorry, I just lost where I was. And the devotee of the Lord must speak loudly so that they can hear. The frogs loudly croak with the result that they invite the snakes to eat them. The human tongue is especially given for chanting the Vedic hymns and not for croaking like frogs. The word asati used in this verse is also significant. Asati means a woman who has become a prostitute. A prostitute has no reputation for good womanly qualities. Similarly, the tongue which is given to the human being for chanting the Vedic hymns will be considered a prostitute when engaged in chanting some mundane nonsense. Okay, so the first part of the purport, we were discussing about hearing about Krishna. Now Prabhupada is going to chanting about Krishna. So the example given for hearing about Krishna is that one who's not using his ears in hearing about Krishna, his ears is no better than the holes in that of a snake. And now for hearing about Krishna, this verse explains one who is not chanting, one who is not using his tongue to chant about Krishna, his tongue is no better than the tongue of a frog. And why is it compared to that of a frog? Because frogs, they live in swamps and they'll croak loudly. And in the swamp there'll be snakes. And for snakes, frogs are the food for a snake. And when the frog will croak very loudly, the snake would hear the frog croaking, and then immediately the snake will come, pounce and eat the frog. So in the same way, materialistic persons, because they have no knowledge of anything higher, they haven't been taught or given this knowledge of Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, so naturally they're engaged in hearing and talking about mundane affairs. And as they go on talking Prajapa, as they go on talking about nonsense or rubbish, as Prabhupada is saying in this purport, all they're doing is simply attracting the snake of death to come closer and closer onto them and swallow them. The snake of time. So in this last part of Prabhupada says, just like mundane persons, they're engaged in very loudly chanting mundane things. Like on the TV, there'll be so many ads of propaganda promoting different mundane nonsense and rubbish. You go on the street, there'll be different people promoting different things. And Prabhupada says that just like materialists, they are very loudly and very enthusiastically propagating their own materialistic propaganda. In the same way, as devotees of Krishna, we should also go out and very loudly speak Bhagavad Gita and very loudly speak Srimad Bhagavatam. So how do we do that? So Prabhupada established Harinam Sankirtan and book distribution. So Prabhupada wanted us to go out on the streets and very loudly chant Hare Krishna on the streets with kartals, mridangas, so people will get a chance to hear the holy name of the Lord. And Prabhupada also wanted us to go out on the streets and distribute his books, so people get an opportunity to read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. As Prabhupada is explaining here, because people they don't have access to great literature like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, what can they do? They don't have anything else, so naturally they're forced to read mundane literature. And Prabhupada later on in his Prabhupada will explain, mundane literatures, the only benefit one gets by reading mundane literature is that it just simply increases their mode of passion, increases their mode of ignorance. So people, by reading all these mundane literatures out there in the bookstores, all they're doing is simply diving deeper into the mode of passion, diving deeper into the mode of ignorance. So unless they get access to books like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, there's no hope for them. They can't get out of this material entanglement. So therefore Prabhupada says that it's our duty as a devotee to go out and very loudly speak this message to others. And also now we have the internet, we can also very loudly and boldly speak on the internet also. Now that the coronavirus pandemic is here, we're not allowed to go out on the streets. So now devotees, they're using this opportunity, using the internet to loudly speak about Krishna. So through Zoom and other different things, devotees are broadcasting classes, kirtans, and publishing videos on YouTube. And this way we see how, like in second chapter of first canto, Sukadeva Goswami, he establishes that devotional service is so powerful that no material thing can impede devotional service. Nothing can stop or impede devotional service. So he says this in the verse, Savai pumsa paro dharmo yato bhakti radokshe ahituki apratihata ye atma suprasidati. So Prabhupada, he takes the words apratihata, which means without break, without stoppage. And Prabhupada elaborates that devotional service, nothing can stop it. No matter what material impediment comes, devotional service bhakti is beyond. Devotional service is transcendental. Nothing can stop the forward march of this Krishna conscious movement. And that's what we're seeing. Even though this pandemic has hit us, devotees aren't allowed to come to a temple. Even in the temple room itself, only 2 people can be in the temple room. And so many restrictions are there. But still, we see that instead of devotees' enthusiasm going down in devotional service, in many cases, for most devotees, their enthusiasm is increasing because now they're at home, they don't have to travel to work. At home, they can do more hearing and chanting about Krishna. And now devotees are realizing more about the importance of sadhu sangha, and more devotees are going deeper into the chanting and hearing about Krishna. So although externally it seems like Maya is throwing a great material obstacle onto us, still devotees, they find out means and ways to still continue on in the forward march of Krishna consciousness. Either in their own personal life and going deeper into the bhakti, or even in the sake of preaching. Still devotees are finding, although Harinam and book distribution is 2 main methods of doing outreach, and now that's stopped, still devotees are finding different means and methods to also do outreach, to also share this message to others through the internet and other various means. So this is one very nice example of how nothing can stop devotional service, nothing can stop this Krishna conscious movement. Prabhupada, he explains in the 10th canto that Prabhupada says that if you look in the first chapter or second chapter of 10th canto, when Mother Devaki is pregnant and with Krishna, and because Krishna is in the womb of Mother Devaki, she is giving off such beautiful effulgence. And then Kamsa, he gets afraid and he comes. And Prabhupada, he explains that the womb of Mother Devaki, that's kind of like the Krishna conscious movement. And demons like Kamsa, they're always very envious of the Krishna conscious movement, and they're always put forward different impediments, just like Kamsa. Prabhupada explained, just like Kamsa, he was sending different demons to go to Vrindavan and kill Krishna, but all these demons, instead of killing Krishna, they themselves got killed, and nothing could harm Krishna. So in the same way, Prabhupada says that this Krishna conscious movement is the incarnation of Krishna in Kali Yuga. Kali Kalarnami Rupe Krishna Avatar. So Prabhupada says this Krishna conscious movement is the incarnation of Krishna in Kali Yuga. And just like 5,000 years ago, when demons like Kamsa were sending so many different demons to attack Krishna and to destroy Krishna, in the same way, now in Kali Yuga, materialists out there, atheists, and Maya herself will put forward different impediments to stop and break apart this movement. But Prabhupada says, just like 5,000 years ago, when no demons, even though so many demons, they tried to kill Krishna, none of them were successful. In the same way Prabhupada explains. In the same way, because this movement, ISKCON, is non-different from Krishna, because this movement is the incarnation of Krishna of Kali Yuga. In the same way, although different impediments will come hit us in the next 10,000 years, either externally or internally, still this movement will go forward, because this movement is non-different from Krishna. Nothing can stop it. It will continue on very strongly. And that's what we're seeing here, that we see through the history of ISKCON. In the earlier days, there were impediments by the police when we would, like especially in Sydney and Melbourne, when devotees were going out on Sankirtan, the police would catch them, put them in jail, then devotees again come out, distribute. And we see that in the communist countries, after Prabhupada left, Prabhupada said, before Prabhupada left, Prabhupada was saying that any devotee who goes and preaches under the Iron Curtain in the communist countries, he will get the special dust of my lotus feet. So after Prabhupada left this planet, many devotees, they went and undercover, they started preaching under the Iron Curtain, risking their lives. At that time, if you got caught by the KGB, you would be put in jail, tortured, and killed in many cases. So, but devotees, although they were getting these impediments from the KGB and the government, still devotees went forward, and they were successful, so much so now in Russia. It's one of the fastest growing countries of Krishna consciousness in the Western world. And same thing we see with the police in other parts of the world. Although initially they were stopping the devotees from doing Harinam or book distribution, then later on things worked out, and now devotees are able to freely go out and express themselves in Harinam and book distribution. And now again, also during Prabhupada's time, there was the impediment of there's this propaganda by the parents of devotees. They were so angry at the devotees of taking their children and making them into devotees, renouncing their job, renouncing their studies, and becoming full-time devotees, that there was this propaganda that ISKCON is brainwashing people out there in society, and there were many cases put forward into the court of how devotees are brainwashing, and by mercy of Krishna, again, ISKCON was successful, and we came out successful in the court, and the judge established that this Krishna conscious movement is bona fide religion. It dates back many thousands of years ago, and there's no question of brainwashing in this movement. And the same way now, again, Maya is putting forward another impediment towards us with this COVID pandemic, where we're not allowed to come to temple, we're not even allowed to go to another devotee's house. We need to have, only for essential reasons we can travel, only for going shopping or so on. So just like in the past, in the history of our ISKCON, there were many different impediments. Still, devotees were strong. And because this movement is not different from Krishna, devotees were able to overcome. In the same way, we're seeing now, even though externally it seems this pandemic is creating so much havoc, still, because this movement is not different from Krishna, this movement is still going forward strongly. As long as we hold tightly onto the lotus feet of Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, take shelter of Prabhupada's books, and take shelter of the devotees, we can, and as we're seeing, devotees are still associating with each other through the internet. This movement will go on and nothing can stop it. And both collectively and individually, we should have that conviction that no matter what happens, no matter what life throws at me or at us, we should have that determination, that drita brita, to continue on in devotional service and never stop no matter what happens. Externally, things will always change. It's a material world, we never know what will happen. Like who would have thought, last year that such a thing like this would happen, COVID, when the temples would be shut down, no one can come, no one can even leave the house, no one would have thought this. So in the same way, in the coming years, who knows what else will happen in our lives. But we should be ready and prepared for anything, and we should have that strong determination that no matter what life throws at us, no matter what Maya throws at us, we should continue on hearing and chanting about Krishna. And in terms of determination, we can take, like Prabhupada, he gives many examples. Like in Gita, Prabhupada gives the example of the sparrow, the little sparrow bird, Mataji was saying 2 weeks ago. And then in Krishna book, Prabhupada gives the example of Mother Rukmini as the example of determination. Mother Rukmini, she hadn't even seen Krishna, but just by hearing about Krishna from different sages, from Narad Muni, she was fully convinced that, I accept Krishna as my Lord and Master. And she had written a love letter to Krishna. In her love letter, she had written that, Krishna, you please accept me as your wife. If you think I am not pure enough for you to accept, then that's okay. I don't mind. What I'll do, I'll fast and do austerities and fast till death. And I'm even willing to do tapasya and austerities for millions and millions of lifetimes until I attain you. So Prabhupada gives this as an example of determination from Mother Rukmini. She's so determined to be fixed at Krishna's lotus feet that Mother Rukmini is saying that I will happily do austerities for millions and millions of births just to get the position of your maidservant. So this is an example of determination that Prabhupada gives in Krishna book. In Bhagavatam, Prabhupada gives the example of Dhruva Maharaj as an example of determination. Although he was 5 years old, he had so much determination to follow the instructions of his spiritual master. Dhruva Maharaj's example is very nice for us because many of the examples we see in Shastras, they're those of pure devotees, who were just liberated from childhood, Nitya Siddha devotees like Prahlad Maharaj. Whereas Dhruva Maharaj's example, we can relate to more because just like all of us, we still have material desires. So with material desires, we're practicing devotional service. And Dhruva Maharaj is an example of someone who was practicing devotional service with material desires. So we can take inspiration or we can relate to Dhruva Maharaj more. So Dhruva Maharaj, he had such a big material desire. He didn't just want, a fancy car or a beautiful wife or, a lot of money, Dhruva Maharaj's material desire was that he wanted a kingdom even greater than his great-grandfather. He wanted a kingdom greater than Brahma, which is, all of our material desires is nothing compared to the material desire that Dhruva Maharaj had. But how did he perfect himself? The key to his perfection, the key to how he was able to overcome his material desire was because he took shelter of his spiritual master, Narad Muni. Because he very strictly followed all the instructions of his spiritual master with great determination, he was able to perfect himself. So, from his example, we can take great lesson of how, as a sadhaka, as a practicing disciple of Srila Prabhupada, of our spiritual masters, we should very firmly and with great determination practice all the things our spiritual master has taught us, all the different rules and regulations Prabhupada has given us, our spiritual masters have given us. No matter what life throws at us, no matter what material impediments comes to us externally, we should still follow all the rules and regulations, still chant our rounds, still hear about Krishna, find out different means of how we can construct a lifestyle, engineer a lifestyle that despite external situations, we can go on very strictly and determinedly following the instructions of our spiritual masters. And this we see with Dhruva Maharaj. He so sincerely and with so much determination, he followed the instruction of his spiritual master Narad Muni. And that's why he was able to get the mercy of Vishnu. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada, he gives the example of Maharaj Prataptarudra as the example of determination. So although Maharaj Prataptarudra, he was a pure devotee, and he wanted to get darshan of the Lord. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not willing. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I'm a sannyasi, how can I meet a king? A king is like a worldly person. What will people think of me if I go associate with a worldly person like a king? And so many of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's devotees, they were appealing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that please, he's no ordinary king, he's a pure devotee. This king, Maharaj Prataptarudra, is even a better devotee than us. He's even a greater devotee than us. You please give him your darshan. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had nothing to do with it. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, if you keep, talking to me about this king, then that's it. I'll leave all you guys. I'll go away by myself. And in this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very adamant not to see this king. And Maharaj Prataptarudra, he was thinking, what is the use of my life? What is the use of my kingdom? What is the use of all my wealth if I can't even get the Sangha of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? And Maharaj Prataptarudra was telling the devotees, telling Ramananda Roy, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, that I don't see any purpose for living. Better I just give up my life and get a new body. So in my next life, maybe I'll have the opportunity to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Prabhupada, he gives this as an example of determination in Chaitanya Charitamrita of Maharaj Prataptarudra, that although Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after repeated attempts, still Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not willing to give him audience. Still Maharaj Prataptarudra was determined, he was trying. And still when he was even prepared to give up his life, just like Mother Rukmani, she was saying, okay, if you don't accept me, Krishna, as your wife in this lifetime, then I'll do austerities for many lives until I get the position of your maidservant. So in the same mood is there in Maharaj Prataptarudra. He was thinking, okay, if in this life Chaitanya Mahaprabhu doesn't give me his darshan, then what is the use of my kingdom? I'm just going to give up everything, become a beggar, and maybe in my next life I'll get Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. Then obviously later on, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gave his full mercy to Maharaj Prataptarudra. So in one lecture, my Guru Maharaj explains that in this pastime, how can we understand this? Because it seems that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not fairly treating Maharaj Prataptarudra, because Maharaj Prataptarudra is a pure devotee of the Lord. He has so much love and devotion. Why is it that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is denying him his audience? So Prabhupada, my Guru Maharaj was explaining that any small act of devotional service we do, Krishna will no doubt reciprocate. The only question is, Prabhupada explains that in terms of reciprocation from Krishna, there could be a delay. So either that reciprocation can happen immediately. Say I do some service today, Krishna can immediately reciprocate just in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour later, or today, or tomorrow, or in a week's time. But sometimes, my Guru Maharaj explains that the reciprocation will happen after a prolonged period of time. And it's not that Krishna is not watching what Krishna is doing. He is just stacking up all of our devotional service. And in one shot, Krishna will give so much mercy in just one go. Just like my Guru Maharaj explains, just like with a dam. Rain falls and the dam comes to 10%, 20%, 10,000 liters, 20,000 liters, 30,000 liters, And slowly it builds up the dam. And then one point, the dam can't hold any longer and there's a crack in the dam. And in one shot, all this, thousands and thousands of liters of water stored in the dam will all come gushing out and just completely sweep away everyone. So in the same way, my Guru Maharaj explains, that's what happened with this king of Orissa, Maharaj Prataptarudra, that it's not that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not noticing all the service he was doing, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was just storing up all of his spiritual credits, and in one go, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reciprocated so much in one go. And that we see later on during the Ratha Yatra, when Maharaj Prataptarudra, he went in disguise and was massaging Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet and was singing the Gopi Geet. And that time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so happy, so pleased, he just went and embraced Maharaj Prataptarudra. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was shedding tears of ecstasy and soaking Maharaj Prataptarudra, and Maharaj Prataptarudra also, he went into ecstasy and he was also crying. So sometime my Guru Maharaj explains that Krishna, he does like this. Sometimes he'll reciprocate immediately, but sometimes he'll store up all of our spiritual credits, and in one go he'll give us a lot of mercy in one go. But no doubt Krishna will reciprocate. Just there might be a bit of delay in the reciprocation. Okay, we'll stop here. Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.